Good morning and welcome to City Hall. We'll get started with the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. Bill Taberney is the Executive Director of the Oklahoma Conference for Churches. He'll lead us at the invocation at the center microphone, and afterwards I'll ask Councilman David Greenwell if he'll lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. But everyone please stand.
Blessed are you, Lord God of the universe. You have created all that exists, and you have created us in your own image. Because of that, we share a common humanity with all people of all nations and of all races, and we have received from you capacities to think, to make decisions, and to do the right thing in terms of justice. As this council meets, we pray that the mayor, the councillors, and all those involved will have a sense of your presence so that they may make decisions with the kind of wisdom that you bestow upon us, and to ensure that there is justice and equity for all. Consequently, we commit ourselves into your service and ask for your blessing. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This morning we will remember George Lewis, who was a pioneer for disability concerns, and George recently passed away around the holiday time, and his widow, Nan, is here this morning. I'd also like Pam Henry to come forward too, if you would, Pam. Pam is the chair of the Mayor's Committee on Disability Concerns, which was pioneered by George. Nan, would you come forward? We also have a resolution in honor of George Lewis's passing, and I'll ask the clerk to read it as we get settled.
Whereas George B. Lewis was born February 16, 1926 in Shamrock, Texas, to Royce Clay Lewis and Helen Irma Ziegler Lewis, and he died December 31, 2011. Whereas George graduated from the University of Oklahoma with a Bachelor of Architecture degree in 1954, after which he moved to Oklahoma City. Whereas George was recognized as the leading advocate in the United States for the elimination of architectural barriers for people with disabilities, and he helped write the landmark National Americans with Disabilities Act. Whereas in 1975, George first served as chair of the Oklahoma City Mayor's Committee on Disability Concerns, and he tirelessly continued in that service for 30 years. Whereas George served as chairman of the Governor's Advisory Committee to the Office of Handicap Concerns, liaison for the City of Oklahoma City to the International Year of the Disabled, and advisor to the President's Committee on Employment of the Handicapped. Whereas George was a member, president, and held every office of the state and local chapters of the American Institute of Architects. For his work, George was honored as a Fellow of the American Institute of Architects and awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award by the Oklahoma City Mayor's Committee on Disability Concerns, as well as receiving awards and recognition from the Oklahoma Rehabilitation Organization, the Governor's Committee on Disability Concerns, Oklahoma State Department of Human Services, Goodwill Industries, and National Paralyzed Veterans of America. Whereas a few of the many projects on which George left his mark with regard to accessibility include the Oklahoma City Cox Center, formerly the Myriad Convention Center, Will Rogers World Airport, Wiley Post Terminal, Mike Monroney Aeronautical Center, Putnam City School District, as well as others throughout Oklahoma City, the metro area, and around the state. Whereas George is survived by his wife of 58 years, Nan, their son Paul, and a host of friends. Whereas George Lewis's impact has been significant, profound, and essential to Oklahoma City and the nation. Now therefore be it resolved by the mayor and council of the city of Oklahoma City that they do hereby extend their deepest sympathies to the family and friends of George B. Lewis.
And we are really going to miss George. We're expecting here to get a motion and a second when we pass this resolution. We have a motion saying cast your votes. It passed unanimously. Let's show our appreciation in memory of George Lewis and Nan for coming down. Thank you so much. Pam, you worked so closely with George through the years, and now you're the chair. You succeeded George, and so there's only been two throughout the history of this committee. Would you like to talk about George for a few minutes?
Well, there were others before us, James L. Dennis and some people before him, but 30 years George led our committee, and he was recognized by the National AIA as the #1 advocate for the removal of architectural barriers in the United States of America. And we have lost his enthusiasm and his knowledge, but not his spirit and his cause. So we love you, Nan, and we love George, and we'll carry on.
Let's show our appreciation one more time. I see now that other members of the committee were here as well as Pam. Thank you all for coming down and remembering George today. When I was elected mayor, one of the first tasks I had to do was to deny his resignation as chair of that committee. Literally, the first week I was mayor, he walks in and tries to resign as chair, and I didn't accept it. He'd been on that committee 30 years, and I think he was ready for someone else to take over. And ultimately, we had Pam step forward and took over for him. But what an advocate, and talk about a guy that was able to take his professional expertise and bring in the private sector as well as the architectural community. He's impacted a lot of lives and really put us at the forefront of a lot of advances in access. And no question, he knew his business, and as Pam mentioned, his enthusiasm was contagious. We're moving on to item 4 of the council agenda. Item 4A is to receive the Journal of Council Proceedings for January 10th, and item 4B is to approve the Journal of Council Proceedings for January 3rd. I have a motion and a second. Count your votes. Passed unanimously. We have one item that we're going to move up from the city manager reports now. It's from the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority, so we can get an update on the Kilpatrick Turnpike. Jim, you want to fill us in?
Tim Stewart's here this morning, and the Turnpike Authority is in the process of beginning to look at and actually begin construction on the widening of the Kilpatrick Turnpike. Its capacity has increased quite a bit. When I looked at the presentation last week, it was really surprised to me that Turnpike's been in place for over 20 years. And it just seems like it was opened up yesterday. So, Tim?
Mr. Couch, members of the council, Mayor, I appreciate this opportunity to share with you briefly the efforts of the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority. Hopefully was provided to you the PowerPoint presentation that we'll be reviewing collectively together. And at any point in time throughout the presentations, if you have questions, please do not hesitate to ask. I have with me today our Director of Engineering, David Murdoch, and the Project Manager over Design, Jeremy Boswell with CPNY, and hopefully we can answer any of the questions you may have. A little bit of history about the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority. We were created as a body in 1947. First roadway that was constructed was the Turner Turnpike, and it was opened to traffic in 1953. All the turnpikes that are on our system, we have 10 in total, are authorized by the state legislature. The OTA currently operates about 606 miles of turnpike corridors throughout the state. We receive no tax appropriations, no tax dollars. Toll revenues pay all operating and cost of debt associated with any turnpike projects. This is a map that gives you an overview of where those turnpikes are located throughout the state. And as the city manager indicated, the Kilpatrick Turnpike, first being of our urban regions that were opened in 1991. Matter of fact, it was a fun run, Labor Day 1991, and I was out there and participated in that run at that point in time. From that, substantial developments occurred along that corridor. Kilpatrick Turnpike was constructed in 2 phases. The first phase from I-35 over to Lake Hefner Parkway was again opened in 1991, and then we added to that segment in 2000, and we opened the segment between Portland or Lake Hefner Parkway around I-40 in 2000-2001 period. There was foresight, I would offer, by those that chose to construct and design that facility at that point in time. They designed it such that they knew development would occur, they knew capacity would need to be added, so they designed a larger median, a 46-foot median, that would help facilitate an additional widening going forward without the need to relocate utilities and to purchase right-of-way. Currently, the average daily traffic on the Kilpatrick Turnpike is a little over 55,000 in those peak areas, and that's around the PN-May in that area of development. That corridor, again, if you take a before and after picture, is pretty phenomenal and when you look at the development that occurred along that. When we initiated that, primarily you had Mercy, a few businesses there at Penn, Quail Springs Mall in 91, and now you look at what's out there today and the continued development. We're excited about that. And it's displayed by our continual annual growth in traffic. We're seeing 3 to 5% growth annually along that corridor. The project limits will be between Eastern and MacArthur, and that's the area that we're looking at widening. But again, because of the heaviest traffic and travel demands in that region, that's the segments that we're focusing on. We'll have to widen 8 bridges in conjunction with that, and those bridges will be widened to the interior. We'll also have to replace the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Bridge that's just to the west of Broadway Extension. We'll have to build a new span there and working in conjunction with Burlington Northern and Santa Fe for that. And we're also going to have to modify the flyover that leads westbound to southbound Portland, or southbound Lake Hefner Parkway. The reason being the current pier that's out there is a hammerhead pier, and the vertical clearances for that pier would not allow us to widen to the median, so we're going to have to replace that pier. So unfortunately, we're going to have some downtime with the Lake Hefner Parkway flyover. We've been discussing with city officials and their engineering department, excuse me, about ways we can minimize disruption to the traffic during that occurrence. Fortunately, again, we don't have to buy a new right-of-way. The next slide will give you an indication of the typical section. We'll have 3 12-foot travel lanes in each travel direction once the facility is completed. We'll have 10-foot inside shoulders, and there will be a barrier or median wall between each direction of travel. We're also building into the project light standards so we can light that corridor as well to improve safety along that. And that, what you see on those slides are the before and after typical sections. The existing toll locations will remain in place. We do not intend to move those. They'll just have to be modified again to accommodate the traffic that moves through there. Fortunately, participation in our Pike Pass system makes it a little more convenient and easier for us to be able to widen again in the middle. A little over 80% of our entire trips that are out there on the Kilpatrick Turnpike right now are achieved through Pike Pass, the electronic means. Hope all of you are participants in that program. If not, we'd love to sign you up. Those movements help facilitate and expedite traffic, minimize smog and other stop-start issues that you would normally see around a toll facility. So we're going to continue to encourage that. We do not anticipate any need for toll increases as part of this project. It's been built into our capital plan model to ensure that we have adequate fundings with the existing revenues going forward. We've recently completed the sale of the bonds for this additional project and as well the project in Tulsa, and those monies are on deposit at the bank now, and we're prepared and moving expeditiously forward for the letting of those projects. Again, during construction, we're attempting to minimize impacts to traffic as much as possible. On the mainline corridor, it's our intent to keep, for a majority of the time, 2 lanes traveling in each direction. So when they're on the turnpike, we may have to slow traffic, much like we did when we added ramps there at May, but they'll still have 2 lanes of traffic to drive along the mainline portion of the roadway itself. Cross streets, we're going to try to minimize disruption as well, shrink the periods of time where lanes have to be closed. We're putting penalties and incentives on the contractors to ensure that we try to expedite work. And then we've got some specific no work periods. For instance, around Penn, and I live just a little ways north of there, there's just no way you can do work basically between the latter part of October into November into January. So we're trying to restrict that and say, no, you can't be out there because of the shopping season, especially around the holidays. So we're cognizant of that. Our project schedule right now is to complete final plans and are on target to advertise the project February the 7th. We are intending to bid and award the scheduled project. That says March the 2nd. We recently had to make a change to that schedule, and it's actually going to be March the 8th. And we anticipate the start of construction in April of 2012. And we're trying to expedite that, as encouraged by the governor, so we can capture 2 good construction seasons. This is a 20 to 24-month project, so we want to optimize 2 summer construction periods, again, to minimize the amount of time the contractor has to be out there to complete the project as aggressively as we can, and be able to do so within those good construction periods. If you start sliding it a few months one way or the other, as you're probably fully aware that you start getting into the winter season, it complicates or slows the progress on the projects. Right now, the probable cost or opinion of probable costs on the projects are about $60 million. We have 2 locations in conjunction with this project based on the environmental studies we completed that we will be adding screen walls to protect and buffer access and buffer noise and buffer other elements between us and local developments. There at North Tulsa, just to the east of Mercy, and I think that's a Greens neighborhood that's along that region, there'll be a wall placed there, and we've already been alerted to concerns about visibility once they pull up to that intersection to be able to clearly see, so we're offsetting that back to ensure there's adequate sight distances along Memorial Road so we won't conflict traffic there. It'll enlarge, follow some of the contours of the existing chain link fence, but it'll be brought back in enough to ensure you've got adequate line of sight. Adequate line of sight in each direction so it's not to disrupt the traffic. The other location we'll need to add a wall is there at Eastern. So on the north side of the turnpike, there's the Oaks addition that's there just north of the turnpike. We're going to try to bring that wall past the limits of that housing development. We're going to be working in conjunction with the Homeowners Association and those homeowners that are there. I know they've invested some money in a local wall there, so we're going to try to preserve that for them, stack it out so they can use it on their own development area, and then tie the existing homes, the fences and fence lines that are on the existing homes to the wall. So we're going to be placing it along almost the exact same corridor as the existing fence, just a little bit offset because of construction sequencing. That's an overview of the project. I hope it gives you an idea of where we're headed. We appreciate very much the city and their cooperation with us and help with us in providing inside feedback and ideas about how we can improve construction. I'm going to apologize in advance. There'll be a little bit of disruption. Of course, after driving downtown here, I'm sure you're very familiar with disruption, so we're not going to quite have it to that level, but we will have some disruption. We appreciate your patience as we work through this project. Be happy to answer any questions.
Comments or questions for Tim? Ed, and then Gary?
Your Honor, also. I want to ask you about the bridge, the railroad bridge for BNSF. You said it's at Broadway Extension. And just ask you, have the plans for that been finalized, or that?
We're at 90% stage right now with plans. We're getting the railroad's review in conjunction with that. We are completing, matter of fact, this last week had design review committee meetings to discuss modifications that may need to be done with that, but we're moving with the full anticipation of having those completed by February the 7th.
Do you know if that bridge, if the plans are for it to be double-tracked, or to have enough room for it to be double-tracked, or?
If you don't mind, that's a question I don't have the answer to. If I can bring our designer for Jeremy Boswell.
Good morning. I'm Jeremy Boswell, CP&Y. To answer your question, sir, yes, the BNSF Railroad requires us to accommodate a future widening of that track. And so our bridge, the bridge replacement is designed to accommodate their future widening, and that's part of our plans.
Okay, because some of the problems we're having, like on 50, where ODOT is doing doing the bridge, is if you have commuter rail at some point in the future, BNSF is not going to let you use their tracks for commuter rail, so you've got to have another track. You have to be a certain distance away from their track.
Sure.
And it would be a shame to redo that bridge and then have to come along 10 years later and redo it again. And so just hope that commuter rail would be taken into consideration in those plans.
Our plans at this time are addressing the requirements that BNSF has for a future expansion of their facility. And that's, it includes the existing tracks and then room for additional offset track in the future. So, did I answer your question?
I think so. I mean, if there could be some coordination with the railroad department at ODOT, and just some consideration given, maximum consideration given to future commuter rail requirements.
If I may speak to that, we partner with the Department of Transportation. Under this project specifically, we are using some of their staff and working in conjunction with them in our contacts with Burlington Northern and Santa Fe, and working very arm in arm with the department in review of those and comments from the railways for those corridors. So they're aware of what we're doing. We're aware as they bring to us what their plans are going forward. So we'll try to be as accommodating as we can in that venture.
Thank you.
I don't mean to put words in my colleague's mouth, but I think he's more concerned about a third track through there. If BNSF wants two tracks ultimately, to answer Councilman Shadid's questions, is there going to be room for a third track, a commuter rail track through there?
Right now, we're trying to accommodate the demands as established by BNSF. We've not taken additional steps to go beyond what's not programmed or what's not planned at this juncture. At that point in time, when a commuter rail designation has been established, I know we'll be working very closely with the Department of Transportation and all those that will be sponsoring that effort, and make whatever enhancements need to be made at that point in time. But based on the information we have today, we're just trying to accommodate the demands going forward as currently planned and perceived. Yes, sir. Both of those within the control of Burlington Northern.
Larry?
On another matter, and Jim, this may be directed toward you, but what is the status, from the Turnpike's perspective, on extending the Turnpike to the south and connecting it? You know, a number of years ago, back in 2001, there was a plan from Southwest 15th to move the Turnpike to the south. Has any motion or discussion on that been contemporary right now?
We partnered with the Department of Transportation in conjunction with us and ACOG and the Department of Transportation, did a three-party study that we all participated in and completed that about 8 years ago. And that study established a corridor that they looked at that could have been considered as a preservation corridor for future development demand. The consensus was at that time that there was not enough support to preserve and hold aside that corridor. The study's still in place, and is still on our enabling legislation of potential projects, but based on other demands we have on our system, we currently do not have it in our immediate future to plan an extension in that region. But again, the work from an engineering and environmental standpoint has been completed. It's in our legislative authorization, but it's just not currently in our plans.
Okay. Gary?
Yeah, I've got two questions. The MacArthur intersection is very heavily used. If I'm going west, will it go back to 2 lanes before I get to MacArthur, or will it go past MacArthur?
The widening is to extend to the bridge and then taper back. Is that correct? So you'll have 6 lanes past the ramps that are exiting from the going westbound.
So you'll do the MacArthur Bridge in this project, and then it'll go back to 2 lanes after that?
It'll go back to 4 lanes after that.
Okay. If you're modifying the flyover, did you look or did you even consider creating a nonstop for eastbound traffic to go south on the Parkway? Right now, you have to get off on Memorial Road and go to the light and then turn back again. It's always puzzled me why there wasn't some kind of a connection that you didn't have to stop at to go like you do if you're going westbound.
The movement from westbound to southbound Lake Hefner eastbound to southbound Lake Hefner Parkway, that's part of an original functional layout of that interchange. We've tried to continue to preserve right-of-way, and as we look at the elevations of the flyover structure that was there, we tried to build it into our overall planning model where at some future date that could be added. That's not in our current plan.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Yeah, David, and then Pat.
Go ahead, Pat.
Well, I just thank you for your sensitivity about the Pennsylvania intersection. I think that's at the time you're not going to have construction there is crucial. Is there anything, in your opinion, that we could do to improve that intersection?
We are working on a phase 2. What we are completing right now under construction is phase 1 of the project. We split the project into 2 phases to try to expedite traffic improvements on the main line. And in so doing, then when we determined to go back and make improvements at interchanges, we've got additional lanes to put traffic to, and it's easier to do construction. Our phase 2 looks at each of the interchanges, including Pennsylvania Avenue, along that corridor to determine what improvements will be needed at those interchanges. We're on target to complete that interchange analysis and preliminary study April of this year, mid to late April of this year, and at that point in time, we'll have a better idea to be able to then sit down with the city and talk about master long-term plans. I know the city has already made a very good effort in developing the Texas turnaround, or we call them Oklahoma U's, but they're at Penn. But as well, we partnered in that process and put additional ramps there at May. And we're seeing a redistribution of traffic because of that. It's helped unload that corridor significantly. Now there may need to be some additional improvements at Western long-term, not only just specifically at Penn. So we're looking at it corridor-wide.
Good, thank you. You mentioned lighting.
Yes, sir.
Do you have any idea when that might be installed? Is it part of this project?
The lighting down the center of the roadway would be installed in conjunction with this roadway, with this project.
Thank you.
Your Honor. Tim,
Yes, sir.
could we go back to the map on page 3? And this follows up on Councilman McAtee's question about extending the Kirkpatrick Turnpike. There is a large amount of interest both in Cleveland County and South Oklahoma City to see that extended. And I think it would, if nothing else, help relieve a little bit of the traffic, especially the trucks traveling, from the west that need to go on to I-35. If we could extend that southward down over to I-35 or down to Highway 9, as you can see, that part of the turnpike, as well as connecting Norman, South Oklahoma City, Mustang. I would just think that would be very helpful in developing and connecting those communities if we did see that extension go through. So I just wanted to say there is a lot of interest, again, both within South Oklahoma City as well as Cleveland County, to see that happen. Is there anything that we could do to participate in reestablishing that interest by the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority?
The efforts made thus far by the city, working in conjunction with ACOG and the Department of Transportation in that study review, I think was a substantial step toward a long-term master plan. There's much of that corridor right now is currently four-laned. It's not necessarily the preferred corridor out of the study, but it was an alternative corridor that currently from State Highway 152 south around and almost to the connection of the Norman Spur or the H.E. Bailey Turnpike is fully four-lane except for about a 2-mile segment. The section north of 152 is local city streets. So that corridor, to preserve or be able to make that connection would be much more economical than the alternative that was the preferred alternative from the report, which again, I apologize for the date, I don't remember exactly, but I think it was about 8 years ago, and that was about an $800 million project at that point in time. And based on demand and funding limitations that we all work under, a decision was made not to do that at this point in time. Doesn't mean we've ignored or totally lost sight of that, but we've got to balance that against other demands we have throughout our system.
Well, thank you. I just want to, again, indicate that there is an interest for that, and if there's some way to establish some meetings or other processes to just try to revisit the amount of interest and demand, I think it'd be worth everyone's time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Meg?
And if I could just make a quick comment and follow on with Councilman Shadid's comments, perhaps at your next meeting with the railroad and ODOT, you might take back some of the comments from this council that we would be particularly interested and encouraged for you to be thinking 10 years out and thinking about the possibility of commuter rail. And it does seem a shame if we're going to rebuild a bridge that we don't take into consideration what some of those future opportunities would be and try to maximize our dollars.
Yes, ma'am. I appreciate that.
Any other comments or questions? All right, we look forward to the widening of the Kilpatrick. Thanks for coming down.
Thank you, sir.
Move back to item 5 on the council agenda. It's request for uncontested continuances. Are there any this morning?
We do have some this morning on dilapidated and unsecured, starting on page 9, item 8A1, item I, 622 North Broadway. We ask that that be stricken to notify new ownership. And then on to page 10, under 8B1, item B, 2120 Glen Ellen Street. We ask that that be stricken. The owner secured. Item H, 1434 Millam Court. We ask that that be stricken. It's now occupied. Item L, 1721 Northwest 2nd Street. We ask that that be stricken to re-notify. Item N, 1832 Northwest 10th Street. We ask that that be stricken to rework for additional violations. Item O, 1209 Northwest 11th Street. We ask that that be stricken to rework for additional violations. Item P, 1139 Northwest 12th Street. We ask that that be stricken to rework for additional violations. Item S, 540 Southwest 24th Street. We ask that that be stricken. The owner has secured. Item V, 3725 Southwest 43rd Street. We ask that that be stricken. The owner has secured. Item Y, 8 Southeast 59th Street. We ask that that be stricken. The owner has secured. And item Z, 706 Southeast 69th Street. We ask that that be stricken. The owner has secured.
Are there any other requests for uncontested continuances?
Mayor, if I could just make a quick comment. I'm delighted to see that 622 North Broadway is coming off that list. That's the Hales Photo Building that had received a lot of interest after it was placed on dilapidated 60 days ago. And as noted, the building has changed hands, and so we'll be working, staff will be working with new ownership to get that building cleaned up and reoccupied. So it's great news for Broadway and Automobile Alley.
All right, we'll recess the council meeting, convene as the Oklahoma City Municipal Facilities Authority. We have a motion and a second on the 5 items under the MFA. Any comments or questions? All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. We'll adjourn the OCMFA, reconvene as the Oklahoma City Public Property Authority. There are 2 items. We have a motion and a second on these 2. Comments or questions on the PPA? All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. We'll adjourn the OCPPA and convene as the Oklahoma City Environmental Assistance Trust. There are 2 items. We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions on the 2 items listed under the EAT? All right, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. We'll adjourn the OCEAT and reconvene the council meeting with a consent docket. All right, are there any individual considerations?
F, Your Honor.
Yes, F. All right, Larry, why don't you jump in with F?
Well, F is a plan to upgrade 2 parks in Ward 3, and it involves some planning grants through the planning department and also through the Parks and Recreation. And City Manager, if I could just get a schedule of, doesn't have to be today, of the timeline of when those improvements, what they lay out into the future, I'd really appreciate it.
I don't have that, but I'd be happy to get that to you. You have it? No. Okay, we'll get it to you, sir.
Any other comments or questions? Any other comments or questions on the consent docket?
I've got just one question real quick on item H, not on this project, but at the library jogs my memory that the sign out front, Jim, is maintenance on the library's our responsibility or the Metropolitan Library System?
General maintenance is left at the responsibility. Capital replacement maintenance is, there's a dividing line.
The sign out in front is laminated covered, and the laminate's coming up because people sit on top of it. Could you either get with the library or get somebody to redo that? It's starting to look pretty tacky.
Yes, sir.
Mayor,
Yes, Pete.
on item N, I'd just like to point out, this is just another example of the breadth of the water trust's disposition of water. This is an example. We sell water to a Pottawatomie County Rural Water District. This is water that comes up the Atoka pipeline for all of Oklahoma, really, certainly all of central Oklahoma, and this is just one more example of it. I plan to continue to point these out as they come along in light of the advertising that we see. It's diminished somewhat recently, but the advertising that we see concerning the use of water that comes from southeastern Oklahoma, I plan to point these out as they come along this docket so we can all, and the public can be aware of the breadth of this, of the project. It's not just an Oklahoma City project. It serves people up and down the pipeline and all through central Oklahoma.
And of course, this follows up the agreement 2 weeks ago with the city of Colgate.
Yes.
To provide water for them also.
All right.
All right, any other comments or questions on the consent docket? We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. One item on the concurrence docket. Comments or questions here? All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Move on to item 8. These are items that require a separate vote. We move straight to the list of the dilapidated structures. Do we have a motion? We have a motion and a second. This is a public hearing regarding the list of dilapidated structures. Is there anyone here wishing to speak on any item listed under 8A? Yes, sir. Come on forward. Come up to the microphone if you would. And to start, I'll need your name and address for the record.
My name is Alex Sines. The address is 3020 Southwest 30th.
3020 South, okay. And which property are you wishing to speak about?
It's the property around the back. Apparently, that's the one under question.
There we go. We got a picture of it there.
Well, you really can't see it. That's the front property. It has that one right there.
Okay.
There is an interest with Chase Bank that has some sort of lien problem against it. in regards to the title, it's my mother's property, but she had a $5,000 title insurance on it, and they pretty much told her she had to wait around 2 years. That's why nothing has been done to the property other than occasional boarding up because people kept coming inside of it. I mean, I know it's in pretty bad shape, but we're just trying to figure out what's going to happen with Chase before any other type of work would be done, so we wouldn't be out of pocket on that.
It's in Ward 4, Pete.
I know.
I mean, I've realized that it's been like that for quite a while now, and I mean, it's pretty much up to you guys.
Give me some more information about what your problem is with Chase.
They apparently had some sort of lien on the property before my mother purchased it. After she purchased it, that's why she had the title insurance on it. So there's basically two parties fighting over the same property. We can't do anything about it.
Is Chase one of the parties that's fighting over it?
Yes. They basically won't allow us to rehabilitate it or do anything to it. That's why it's been that way for that while.
What's your plan? Is your plan to tear it down or rehabilitate it?
Well, we were wanting to rebuild it because we have several rental properties in southwest Oklahoma City. But we've noticed that throughout that whole block, each house, starting from Harvey coming on over, has been either torn down or is boarded up. There's only one house, which would be to the west of that is occupied, and the school's right there. We didn't know if there might be any type of plan to expand in the school, or maybe they're parking or anything like that, so we're kind of on the...
No. Well, I mean, it's easy to see why other houses are not occupied. If that's sitting, if they have to be next door to something like that, nobody's going to want to live next door to that.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm going to ask that it be left on and you try to work something out. The idea that a bank can just raise the problem of that they have a claim, I don't, and leave the house in this kind of shape. I think we leave it on. We do whatever you have to do. You figure out something, but that it can't continue to exist like that.
Yes, I understand completely. It's just we're on the page of either we go and invest the time and effort and money to tear it down, either that structure or the other one, and clear out the lot.
Does the bank claim to have a lien against the entire property?
Yes.
Well, that lien's not going to change whether that house is torn down or not.
Okay, but who would have to cut the cost on it? I mean, would it be the bank that would have to pay? Because
well, you can let the city push it over, and then you'll have a lien against the property for pushing it over, and the bank will have to worry about that. You have to decide whether you're going to hang in there with it or not.
Okay.
But it can't stay like that.
Okay. Well, if anything, I mean, could I just get some sort of contact information? Anybody I need to talk to?
Charles is very helpful. He'll do everything he can to try to work it out.
I'll talk to you.
It can't stay like this.
That's
I mean, I think you agree with me.
Yes, I agree with you. I mean, my mother is one that's really pushing towards keeping it.
Put whatever pressure we can on the bank and do something.
Chase has been notified also.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, thanks for coming down. Anyone else here to speak under an item listed under 8A, under dilapidated structures? Yes, please. Good morning.
My name is Wanda Knight, and my address is 516 North Lindsay Avenue, and I have pictures to show where I have cleaned it up, moved the car, and a roof has been put on.
Okay, Charles Shanks is trying to hand you some pictures there.
It has been empty for 5 years.
Okay, this is in Ward 7, and Councilman Kelly is not here today. What are your plans for the property?
To keep it until they come buy it. Everyone else around me has sold.
So you own the property and you're hoping to sell it?
My sister owned it, but she bought it for me.
So are these pictures that we're looking at, are these indicative of the condition of the roof today?
That was the condition. The roof has been torn off, and a new roof has been put on now as we speak.
And these are the pictures that you have?
Yes, sir.
Charles, you want to hand those to council and let us look at the improvements that she's made? How much money have you invested in the property so far?
Cleaning it up?
Uh-huh.
Nothing. We did it.
So you did the roofing yourself?
No. Oh, not the roofing. My uncle is doing that.
Okay. Do you know how much money you've put into the property?
Approximately $800 so far, and that's for the material.
Well, I'm just trying to get some idea of your
Yes.
commitment and your investment that you're willing to make, because we certainly don't want to go down and tear out something that you're, putting significant money in as an investment, if you're willing to turn the property around. Do you have an idea of how much money it's going to take to put this into a condition where it might be able to be sold?
The roof only. Everything else is cleaned up. The car is gone.
Okay.
The debris is moved. The yard is clean.
Charles, do you share the opinion that if the roof was in a different situation, that the rest of the house is probably structurally sound?
Well, we show it that the roof is not completely done yet by our photos. We show no permits have been pulled to do any improvements or any structural work to this property at all. So I would say at this time, I would say no.
Okay. What's your timetable for completing the roof project?
Within 2 weeks.
All right. Well, if we leave this on under the 30-day situation and we see some significant improvement continued in the next few weeks, you could work with Charles, and most likely Charles would be under the idea that we wouldn't need to tear it down. But we've got to see some improvement soon.
Okay. You have to have a permit to roof?
Charles, why don't you give her some advice on permits? What advice can you give her on that?
Anytime that you affect the structural members, decking, rafters, anything to that nature, they have to have a permit pulled and it has to be inspected.
Okay.
Okay. So we're going to leave it on there, and that'll give you 30 days to show some more improvement and to get the proper permitting. And if you'll work with Charles, I'm sure he'll work with you. It seems like a nice building, and we'd love to see your family benefit from the long-term use.
Mayor, may I ask a quick question?
Uh-huh.
You mentioned that all the other houses around you have been sold.
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Is there a project going on over there in the neighborhood?
I live right there on between 8th and Lincoln, and Lincoln is here, and the hospital is down on 8th Street, and the Toby Keith building is being built 4 blocks from where this property is.
Okay, so is that who's making the acquisitions?
No, it was just that the, let's see, I think Oklahoma Memorial or OCC Oklahoma University bought some of it, and the city also bought some of it, and the house right next to me on the north side was sold by a private realtor.
Do you own the property at 519 North Lindsay as well?
No, sir.
Okay. I notice that's also on the dilapidated list, but
Yes.
you're just talking about the 516. North Lindsay.
516.
All right. I'm going to suggest we just leave this on and have her work with Charles. Everybody all right with that? Okay. Thanks very much for coming down.
Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak under an item listed under the dilapidated structures list? All right, looks like we're good to go. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 8B is a public hearing regarding unsecured structures. Is there anyone here wishing to speak on any item listed under 8B? Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Let me ask a question about one of them. On J, is that cleaners there just north of 44th on Walker? Do you know how many times that's been on?
I'm sorry, how long has it been on?
How many times it's been on here? I mean, it's been in this condition, I don't know, 10 years.
Yeah,
like
people
that.
just keep breaking into it, and we put it on, and sometimes they board it up, sometimes we board it up, so. But they
Is there
just have
anything
people-
else we can do about it? I mean, it's not like this is the first or the second or the third time it's been on. And it's sure not the first or second or the third time it should have been on. I mean, it's,
Well, if we do it 3 times within a year, I mean, it does qualify for a dilapidated, but usually we don't have it on that often.
right.
But we can check.
Well, I just like to see something done about it. It's right there right at the corner of the 44th Street project, and Variety's put a lot of money in Lafayette there. We're just a block south.
Right.
There's a lot of good things going on right there in that area, and I just hate to see that thing just continue to look like that.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions under any item listed under 8B for unsecured structures? All right, let's cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 8C, I understand we do not need executive session?
That's correct.
All right, how about a motion then? All right, cast your votes on 8C. That item is passed unanimously. And item 9 is claims recommended for approval. We have one item listed. Is there anyone here wishing to speak on this item, 9A1? All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. And item 10 is items from council. Gary, you want to get us started? All right, Ed?
A lot happened last week. Actually, 4 things that are, I think, worthy of comment, which I'll say briefly. Number 1, I was saddened that I couldn't be at the mayor's event at the zoo. He reached his goal of £1 million. In the medical community, there's a lot of doom and gloom. Over at the surgeon's lounge on the floor at the hospital, I think everybody's getting tired. But I've heard this program of the mayor's mentioned, and I think it represents some hope. I think the real significance, I think, is that it broke through the denial. I mean, it put it on everybody's map, and I think that's the first step in getting some progress made. I think in 2008, when you started, I think basically the odds of us pulling out of this tailspin were about 0. They're not 0 today. I'm just very grateful for all those efforts, and I know that many, many people in the medical community are as well. The second is I'm very worried about the city council elections that are coming up about a year from now in Ward 1, Ward 3, Ward 4, Ward 7. The Ethics Commission met last week. Pete and I have gone to the last 3 or so working on the inadequacies of the Political Subdivisions Ethics Act. They voted 3-2 against sending their detailed recommendations for revision of that act to the legislature. Even after, in all those meetings, and especially last week, pointing out the tremendous inadequacies of the act, that it does not cover all of today's events. District Attorney Prater spoke. He made clear that it's unenforceable, it's unworkable, it's vague. He only has like a paragraph to guide him. It's unconstitutional. The Ethics Commission made clear that they don't have the manpower or the will or even, in their opinion, the jurisdiction to oversee our elections. So we are a municipality with elections that now will be bigger than many state legislature races without an Ethics Commission to oversee our elections. Political consultants spoke, have to be licking their chops, looking at our upcoming elections. They were very cynical, in my opinion, arguing that if we have to have disclosure, it will discourage good candidates from running. And then Pete spoke, and I wish it would have been videotaped. I wish the rest of the council could have seen him speak. It was chilling. And it was powerful. And for someone who's been involved in elections since the 70s, I think he's uniquely qualified to have the 30,000-foot big picture view that really this was our last chance to preserve the system as we have it. I think our democracy is slipping away. Our elections last April were unique only because it was the first. Now it's clear, in 2000 it'll be clear that all this money is coming into all these elections at all levels of government across the country. There won't be anything unique about that anymore. What's unique about Oklahoma City and where we're vulnerable is just that we have no ethics commission overseeing our elections. We have no enforcement. We had 12 entities that participated in the elections. They didn't even file with Francis. And now, as we've picked apart, we shot and we missed, we've picked apart the Political Subdivisions Ethics Act. Everybody knows it's completely inadequate. Everybody knows there's no enforcement. And everybody knows they can do whatever they want next year. And they don't even, never mind disclosure, they don't even have to file with Francis. And there will be no consequence. So I would hope that we as a group could maybe vet this and try and work towards other solutions. I don't know what those would be. Pete has some ideas, but we have to do something, or else I think those elections a year from now will be chaotic. Third thing is that Representative Mike Reynolds filed a bill on Friday. He wants to recreate, we have this problem with preemption where the state legislature has said that no municipality can file an ordinance on smoking or tobacco that's stricter than state law. And I hope that that falls this year. I hope that that gets repealed. But he's filed one now that says that no municipality can have anti-discrimination clauses that are more restrictive than state law, and it'll be retroactive to the ordinance that we just passed on sexual orientation. I don't want to talk about sexual orientation. We've already vetted that. But the hypocrisy of state legislators trying to curtail or limit how the decisions we make for our own city is overwhelming, especially when these same legislators are so upset at federal government's powers and arguing for local rule and for states' rights and how wrong it is for federal government to impinge on states' abilities to rule themselves. It's just as wrong for states to come in after the fact and try and tell us. All of us are intimately connected with our wards and with the people of Oklahoma City. Frankly, I think our method of government is far superior to the state legislature in that it's nonpartisan. We don't have political parties complicating the process. We all get along, are civil. We vote together one day and against each other the next, and it all works out. But we're in a much better position to decide for decisions for Oklahoma City, and to try and curtail our ability to govern, I just think is wrong. And I would ask those who are listening to call your state legislatures and tell them that if you have a problem, tell them that you have a problem with state legislators trying to make these preemption laws that would curtail our ability to govern. Fourth and finally, I agree with the Oklahomans editorial board. They are very articulately expressed concern about the issue with Paramedics Plus and IMSA. We had the unfortunate incident where a driver was driving in far in excess of the 10 miles an hour that you're allowed to drive past the speed limit, and unfortunately a citizen was killed. The Tulsa World and myself as an IMSA board member asked for information. How many, this particular driver had a DUI on his record, which is against IMSA's state written policy. So we asked how many disciplinary actions, how many records, and basically we were all told that is under the jurisdiction of Paramedics Plus, which is a private corporation, and we can't have access to how many times there's been disciplinary actions, driving records. The way it was explained to me is if it's, as long as it's more than 5 years old, and so it's not an issue for insurance, and therefore IMSA is not liable for it, you could have multiple DUIs, multiple reckless driving. You could have multiple disciplinary actions in the last 5 years, and we don't have access to any of that information. So the Oklahoman argued that they actually would be, that there's a problem with that. The help I need from the municipal counselor's office is clarification on whether that information would be subject to the Open Records and Open Meeting Act. And we debated this when we talked about the Alliance for Economic Development. We talked about the Attorney General's opinions that a for-profit and non-profit organization would be subject to those acts if one of two things were present. If it's a subordinate entity which exercises actual or de facto decision-making authority on behalf of a governmental body, or if the private organization is supported in whole or in part by public funds, or entrusted with the expending of public funds or administering public property. My understanding is that at least 30 of those ambulances are still owned by the city of Oklahoma City today.
There are certain, I don't know the number, Councilman, but there are certainly some.
That is public property that's owned by the city of Oklahoma City, and there we have hired this entity or contracted this entity to operate public property. I'm having trouble understanding how, therefore, things like disciplinary action and would not be subject to open records and open meeting. And I just
we'll get back with you on that, Councilman.
Thank you very much.
Larry?
Your Honor, just a couple of things. Last Wednesday, the Youth Council had the opportunity to focus in on Ward 3, and one of the events that they had was very unusual and I thought very productive. Hobby Lobby, a very large employer, in fact, one of the largest employers in Oklahoma City, opened up their facility to the Youth Council. The president and founder, David Green, spent a considerable amount of time discussing his vision for Hobby Lobby, how it started, how God had blessed it over the years, and I think it was a very eye-opening experience for our counselors to be able to do that. So I'd like to express publicly my appreciation both to the Youth Council and to David Green for opening up his facility and making that educational opportunity available to our students. As a part of that same thing, I got to ride my first city bus since being in Oklahoma City since 1969. I grew up in public transit, but they took us as a youth council and observers to different locations in southwest Oklahoma City, left us on a street corner, and allowed us to ride the bus from there down to the terminal. And it was very eye-opening, and I don't know, Mr. City Manager, the bus driver by name who took us from Southwest 44th to Independence, but I hope you can find out from Rick Kane and pass along what an enthusiastic professional gentleman he was and the type of service he rendered to the public as they got on and off the bus. It was just a very educational opportunity. The bus was immaculately clean, and it was just a great experience. And then Thursday night, my congratulations to St. Anthony Hospital. They had a reception. I guess they're going to dedicate their new emergency facility at Southwest 134th and I-44 this week. Tremendous addition over there to provide. I realize we're being not proactive but reactive to health concerns, but at least we're doing something to improve the quality of health of our citizens, and that was just a very uplifting experience to see the facility over there and the enthusiasm that the people had for the service that they were going to render. Thank you, Your Honor.
Pete?
This meeting is going to follow the rule of all city council meetings, that the meeting expands to fill up the time that we have this morning. So I'm going to take some of the time myself. St. Anthony's had opened a facility in southeast Oklahoma City a week before, and it's absolutely a wonderful facility, and certainly I have in the past welcomed them to southeast Oklahoma City, but it's a wonderful facility. It's perfectly located, and it's a really good facility. I'm really impressed with it.
Where is it located, Pete?
It's at 29th and Douglas. Actually, it's on Douglas, just south of 29th. It's I-40 in Douglas, actually.
I wasn't familiar with that.
It is. They're similar. They're just alike, I think, in fact, the two facilities. But they're really nice and certainly a welcome addition to that part of Oklahoma City. The other thing is to follow up on what Councilman Shadid said about the Ethics Commission. In the past, our own reporting requirement has required us to divulge both the name and the amount of money contributed for campaigns, and I think it's worked very well in the past. Citizens United has said that that is the new standard, and it says that it takes limits off really with regard to money, and it does not require doesn't require disclosure, but says disclosure is possible if organizations will implement it. I hesitate to urge the city to set up its own ethics commission because we'd have to appoint separate ethics commissioners and we'd have to set up a whole set of rules. But I don't think that we can afford to not have a system that requires people to report money that's contributed to campaigns. Frosty Troy used to say that money is the mother's milk of politics, and he was absolutely right. He said that 50 years ago, and it's absolutely the truth. I'm not as concerned about who they are as I am, about the amount of money they put in, although I think it's only by degree that I'm not concerned. But certainly we should know who they are. I mean, the idea that you can run a campaign, as Councilman Shadid did last time, and face $250,000 perhaps being put into that campaign by people he doesn't know, who don't have a face, who never stand up. It's ridiculous. That's not the way the system is supposed to work. If you put the money in, you ought to be willing to say who you are. And we need to change our system. If we have to do it internally, we need to do it internally. Because we're going to throw away a system that's worked well for in my knowledge, it's worked well for the last 50 years at least. I've had personal experience with it in Oklahoma City for over 30 years, and it worked well. And the idea that we just throw that away and go to a system that's totally unregulated is beyond me. The only thing that's regulated now is some individual, one of these people that's sitting out here today. If they put money in, they have to give us their name, they have to give us their address, they have to tell us how much, and it goes on our campaign report if it comes to me. But if it comes to a fund set up on behalf of whomever might be my opponent, they could dump any amount of money into that, say anything they want to. I don't know who they are. I don't know how much money was put in. It's ridiculous. It's not the American system as we know it. I don't want anyone to think that I'm urging that we form our own ethics commission at this point, because I think that's going to be very, very difficult. But I would like to ask that we set up some kind of a group within this to perhaps, I think Norman has their own ethics commission. I'm not sure how happy they are with it, but I'd like to talk to somebody. Perhaps Mayor Rosenthal would talk to us about how she sees it working. But some way, I think the Citizens United case gives us the ability to ask for the names of people, and it also gives us the ability to put in place sanctions and financial. I think the idea that you have criminal sanctions for election contribution violations, the Federal Election Commission got rid of those a long time ago.
Can you explain how this is different than a PAC that's been around for a longer period of time? What's the difference structurally?
The difference in the PAC, if the PAC contributes directly to my campaign, then you have the name of the PAC.
But now, you don't know who put money into the PAC.
I don't need the name of everybody in every firefighter. If the firefighter's PAC contributes to me, if it says the Oklahoma City Firefighters, that's good enough for me. Or if it says the Home Builders Association, Oklahoma City, that's good enough for me. I don't need to know everybody. I don't have to have CJW's name in it. And that's okay. And that contribution, if it comes to my campaign, is disclosed in that manner, and that's fine. But if the contribution comes in the form of services that never comes to my campaign, and we indulge in this fiction that there's no connection between the two, me and that other entity. Now, I'm not saying that anybody that was involved in the last election had any direct association, but there wasn't any question when you looked at the materials. There was a connection between the candidate and the message, because they were storming, they were bludgeoning those that they opposed. So to me, it's a fiction to say there's nothing. A candidate could stand up and say, don't do it, but even that would only satisfy the candidate's attitude about that it's wrong. That wouldn't stop anyone from doing it, and it has no legal impact at all. If you give the money to that separate entity, as in the last election, the entities were formed by a corporation was formed, money was contributed to that corporation, another corporation was formed that the money was then contributed to, that new corporation then did all the damage, and then it disbands or just refuses to file. So nobody knows who put the money up originally. Nobody knows.
So it's created solely for that round of campaigns.
For that,
and that's somehow different than a PAC, even though they're both anonymous. This just seems.
No, they're not. No, they're not both. They're not anonymous in nearly the same way.
Well, they're anonymous to the individual contributors.
Your Honor, may I? And I don't mean to get in the middle of this, but what Pete's talking about, the technical term is independent expenditures. When a group, a committee, expends money on a campaign, without any, as Pete describes it, any contact with the candidate. They're making what's considered independent expenditures. That's what the Citizens United case addressed, was whether or not corporations could make these so-called independent expenditures, as well as unions and other organizations, and they ruled yes, they could. My understanding at the federal level, the FEC does require those entities to report who their contributors are. The reason why I say that is I'm doing a paper from a tax standpoint on 527 plans, organizations, I mean. And it's just the state, and reading the article after you, and I guess Councilman Shadid spoke to them, I think they're looking at waiting until the legislature decides as to what to do at a state level before they make a decision at the municipal level. So I don't think just because they voted last week that this is a done deal or it's over. I think they wanted to wait and get the state requirements in place, and then the municipal requirements would follow. So I think I would anticipate that they'll start requiring those types of disclosure rules. Now, whether or not they have the ability to enforce
You're much
it.
more optimistic, David, than I am, because they missed the opportunity to be the bully pulpit for doing this. They didn't have to. They have no authority, David, at all, none. They have no authority to enact anything. They only act based on the legislature. All they had to do was to say they felt like that this needed to be addressed, and they refused to do that.
No, and I don't take it that I'm trying to defend them, because I don't know that much about the State Ethics Commission. But according to the article, they are going to, next month, I guess sometime in February, look at it from a state level. And then they just said they didn't feel like it was appropriate to create municipal rules before enacting legislation on these independent expenditures at the state level. And according to the article, I think they're going to look at it next month, and then they'll try to combine the rules for both levels.
Well, after being out there several times and talking to them, I'm certainly not holding my breath. Because they don't have the authority to do anything. They could be the bully pulpit, and the two people that voted to do that do just that. That's what they said. They said they should be on record to talk about this. Now, maybe the majority of us don't want to do that. I mean, this is a community that 5 votes makes an elephant fly or a donkey. But I am saying that we cannot let this go through another election cycle. If we wait for the legislature, what's going to happen is we will have 2 more election cycles. We'll have the next election cycle on the council, then we'll have a mayoral election before they do anything about it, because they won't be able to do it soon enough. If you have people that are as obtuse as some of the people that we're dealing with in the legislature now, they're not going to be able to do anything. We're going to have to do something ourselves. Do we all think it's right that money that came in doesn't have to be acknowledged? Do we all think that's okay? I'm not saying I don't want anyone that benefited from that money or that was victimized by that money. That's not my point at all. My point is disclosure. It seems to me that you ought to have to say who you are if you're going to do that. That's my point. I want to know who you are. If you're going to say bad things about me, I want to know who you are, because I may want to say bad things about you. I may want to. We're watching it happen right now I'm loving the debates on TV, because it's great theater, and it's happening right now. They're arguing about what other people are saying. And they're saying, well, no, why don't you make them stop? And the guy says, well, your guy's doing it too. Well, that shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that way. You should know who they are. And on the federal level, David's right. They know a whole lot more about it on the federal level. At our level, we don't even know anything about it. How many of them, is 12 the right number, Francis, that contributed and didn't report? Is that, I heard Councilman Shadid say, they just thumbed their nose at us. They just spent the money. 12 of them did it. 12 different independent expenditure organizations, and I'm sure they had to be on both sides of the issues. Certainly they all weren't on the same side. But they just said, no, we don't have to do that. We're not going to do it. And we don't have any ability to force them to do it. It's going to undermine the process. I mean, part of what's made this country and the way we do business great is because we do it because of the way we've done it. And to this dramatically change it so that anybody can put in money, there are no limits. There are no limits on that. You don't have to disclose who you are. You don't have to file reports. It's such a dramatic change. I worry for the future of the process. Who wants to? What guy out there that wants to be a city councilman who's mad because we didn't pave his street, so he decides he's going to, or we argued about taking his sign down, is going to, that wants to file for office, is going to file against $500,000 worth of undisclosed money? I can't imagine. The idea, the political consultants, Pat Hall and Pat McFerrin, both got up there and said they thought it would dampen activity. Well, it sure as hell might dampen some of the activity, some of it that might be dampened if they had to tell who their names were. It's going to dampen what it's really going to dampen is it's going to dampen people getting in. Now, who's going to want to get in? Nobody's going to want to run against that. And that's my point. I'm frustrated that I didn't expect them to enact legislation. They don't enact legislation. What I expected the Ethics Commission to do was say, follow up on everything they said up to the vote and say, we believe this is wrong and we urge the legislature to do something to fix it. That's what I want to do. And so I'd like to ask the mayor to at least look into the idea that we try to see if there's a middle ground somewhere for us to come. Something we'd have to look at forming our own ethics commission, but I would, which I think we'd be remiss not to. But I'm not advocating that because I think that's going to have an ethics commission in Minco and one in War Acres and one in Midwest City and one in Oklahoma City, and that's not a good way to do it. I don't think that's a good way to do it. But at least look at it. Look at what's out there for us to require disclosure and put some teeth in it. If you don't disclose, then you have to pay a fine.
Well, let's ask the municipal councilor to give us an opinion about municipalities' abilities to control the election laws for local or elections. Are we restricted to following state guidelines, or is there discretion at the municipal level to handle the reporting?
Well, the state act is very clear, and it's limited. I think you could do other things if the acts were amended to require disclosure. And the Ethics Commission is looking at recommendations.
Maybe we should take a look at this at our legislative committee.
Yeah, the clerk, yes, it would be a legislative.
I know you can do something different than we're doing now, because Norman has an ethics commission, so I know it's possible. But don't misunderstand, I'm not advocating we go directly.
Okay.
Councilman Shadid and I have talked about that, and I think that's a slippery slope. I mean, we'd have to appoint commissioners and all kinds of things would have to happen, and that becomes political, and I don't want that. What I want is to find a simple system that requires disclosure and has penalties for failure to do it. End of conversation.
Why don't we work on that at the legislative committee level to try and draw some attention at the state level that if they're not going to do it, then to allow us to do it.
Right.
Mayor, may I make just one quick comment? And I think this has been a great discussion, and Pete, I really appreciate it. And I actually agree with you, I think, across the board. But I think we've left the impression for the viewers that this was something we did. So we threw this away and we've turned this around. This was a Supreme Court decision. It wasn't anything that we did at this level to make this change. So addressing it to make a correction, I think is an important discussion. But I just want to be really clear that this isn't anything that this body did to change the way our elections run, or any way that, our state legislatures did anything. This was a Supreme Court decision related to freedom of speech.
No. In fact, Meg, I agree completely, because pre-Citizens United, we had our system is a good one. It's a good one. It required disclosure. It had limits. It's a good one. The only thing wrong with it was that if you violated it, as the district attorney says, if you violated it, the law with regard to violations are so vague that he would have had a hard time doing anything about it if you violated it. But the fact that the law was out there, I think, prevented many violations, because you have a law, you have a recording requirement, you have the integrity of the campaign, the candidates on the line, and so I think it wasn't a problem prior to Citizens United. But somehow, I think we need to find a way. I've said that before, but I do think we can do. There are things we can do. We don't have to wait for the state legislature. Again, Norman has an ethics commission, and we need to look at determining if there's something we can do between what we have now, which is a toothless tiger, and an ethics commission, which I'm not sure is a good solution either. But that's my point.
Okay.
At least twice.
David, you want to follow this up?
Well, I'll try. Again, congratulations to St. Anthony's Hospital. I did get to attend the grand opening and blessing of the new facility on 134th and I-44, and it is a very, very nice facility. I also was able to take a hard hat tour about a month or so ago before they completed everything. That's really helpful to be able to have that kind of facility, and it's going to go well beyond Oklahoma City. It'll be beneficial to the citizens of Tuttle, Blanchard, even Mustang. So it's a great facility. Speaking of economic development, tomorrow we have a meeting at the South Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce focusing on all of South Oklahoma City, not just Ward 5. We have some representatives from the Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce, the Alliance for Economic Development, as well as South Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce, and we're going to talk about efforts that are being made and some of the successes that have been achieved, both from economic development in general, and then more specifically as it relates to South Oklahoma City retail development, focusing, beginning with Pete's Ward, Ward 4, Crossroads Mall, the new owners, as well as tying in Tinker Air Force Base back to Will Rogers Airport. And I have to excuse myself when I talk about the opening of the east side of Will Rogers Airport. It sounds like it's going to happen next month, and I know that's not the case, but Councilman McAtee, if you'll continue to put pressure on him to hurry up with that. But I think I-240 becomes a great link between the airport and Tinker, and aerospace is certainly an area that the state has focused on as a priority industry, and I think South Oklahoma City fits so well in regards to that, and then reestablishing I-240 as a strong retail economic development center, as well as the other parts of South Oklahoma City, 59th Street, 44th Street, Capitol Hill, Stockyards. And then Thursday night, we move over to Emmaus Baptist Church on 160th and Southwestern. The focus of that meeting will be the widening of Western Avenue and connecting it all the way down to the city of Norman, and the impact that'll have on the neighborhoods and communities. And I appreciate the staff from the city, Russell Klaus, Eric Winger, Bob Tiener, and Major Jennings from the Santa Fe Police Division attending there. And we'll talk about issues affecting those neighborhoods. But also, once we do widen Western, I think that's just naturally going to draw development from a commercial standpoint along Western, especially on 149th, as it pulls the development along South 19th Street and more back into South Oklahoma City, because really it's South Oklahoma City that supports those other entities. And then finally on Saturday, we'll finish up at the Oklahoma City Community College at a 3 p.m. meeting. Again, members from our staff as well as Major Jennings will be there. And also the Oklahoma Community Action Agency will be there to talk about resources they have for some of the more mature neighborhoods in South Oklahoma City. And so I hope everyone can attend. Everybody's welcome to attend any and all of those meetings. And even if one's focusing, say, on economic development, we'll always talk about anything that relates to an individual or a resident. So I hope everyone can join us. Thank you, Mayor.
Meg?
And I guess two things. I can't let the meeting go by without saying go Thunder. How exciting to have them beat my hometown Knicks. It was wonderful, and that Celtics game last night was fantastic. I also would like to thank the Crestwood neighbors. I spent about an hour at the Crestwood neighborhood meeting the other night, and it was one of the first meetings I've attended where I don't think we had a single complaint. It was so exciting, just to hear their observations about what's going on in the community. We had some decorative lights out, but rather than complaining about it, they were so excited that the project had been undertaken. They had great ideas about our trail systems, and I think I've got a new volunteer for one of our trail subcommittees, and it was just a great meeting, and I'm excited to see Crestwood really catching on fire. Thank you.
Pat?
Your Honor, just briefly, I want to tell Councilman White how much I appreciate his comment, because the wrong group of people could do serious damage to the city if they got in control. Anyway, I do appreciate the thought behind it, because the last election was a different kind of election. The other two I participated in. Interesting experience. I have a much more mundane, less significant issue to ask about this morning. State Highway 74, which is the extension of the Hefner bypass, is a state project. It's been in the mill for several years, and a date's been thrown around 2014. I'm not sure that's the starting date or the completion date, but I would like to urge the city to move forward on all the major arterials that connect with that, so that when they open up 74 four-lane traffic, we are prepared for that occasion. It carries an enormous amount of traffic. It's a two-lane road right now behind it, through 150th, 164th, and four-lane traffic, I think, is going to increase, and we need to be prepared to deal with that.
All right. City manager reports. Anything else?
Nothing to add, sir.
All right. No one has signed up for citizens to be heard. Is there anyone here wishing to speak to the council today? All right. We're ready to adjourn. We're adjourned.